Whew. All right, what's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father. At Amazon, Kindle, and create space. A link will be in the description box below as usual. Video is entitled A Matriarchal Alpha Male. And I'm going to add to it versus a patriarchal alpha male, but I'm going to just start it with this one. I'm sick, so you just bear with me. A lot of what we talk about is when people talk about alpha male, it seems to lean more so to which is an alpha male and a matriarchy. Because what alpha males have to do with is how many women they can sleep with, how many women they can attract. You know, their masculinity and their manhood and their alpha is tied directly into sex. You know, so in some ways, the alpha male is the biggest, baddest buck, in a sense. And I think this is part of the reason why we go wrong in our community is because the men who are deemed alpha are just deemed alpha sexually. You know, and we don't think about it. You know, what makes you alpha? Being tall, being muscular, being what you would consider aggressive, being good looking. That's it. And being able to dress well, or having fashion, swag, or confidence. For me, that's a matriarchal sense, because you have to be aggressive to be alpha male in general. But that definition has nothing to do with necessarily being a protector or a provider. It just has to do with being attractive, or protector looking, or provider looking, not actually being. And some people get mad at that ideology, but for me, when I think about it, that's more so true, because the women who the women deem as alpha men haven't done anything to build a community in 30, 40 years. Who the men follow as alpha men haven't done anything for 30, 40 years to build a community. And how can you be alpha? You can be alpha in that matriarchal sense when you ask a guy, you know, what has he done? He's going to tell you how much sex he's got. You're not getting sex like me. You don't get the women that I get. You don't have the rotation that I have. That's what makes me an alpha male. And it's like, wait. And part of the issue when it comes to, excuse me, this dynamic of transitioning into guys who are protectors, providers, builders of society, actual soldiers, an actual enforcement arm, actual inventors. That's two different cultures, because that's more of a patriarchal alpha. They had to create and build and generate interest. They had to build their own little society and enclave and generate interest and be the kings of their own castle. In that instance, they weren't crowned by a bunch of women saying you sexy. They actually had to go out into the world and fend for themselves. So that's why I say, you know, those other guys are more so patriarchal alpha males, because it's not saying that you can't be both. But what I am saying is, when I look at it, the guys who are matriarchal alpha males hang their hat on sex. The guys that are patriarchal alpha males hang their head on accomplishments. Excuse me. Accomplishments, things they've created, things they maintain. You don't hear these matriarchal alpha males talk about the businesses that they have, or the income, or the revenue that they create, or the jobs that they provide, or the products that they've created. You know, they're consumers just like the women, and because they're consumers, at the end of the day, they play into that matriarchal mindset. And for the most part, it looks like these matriarchal alpha males are more controllable than the guys that are patriarchal alpha males, because they're driven by sex. Like that's their whole shtick. So, you know, their man, if the sex dries up, so does their manhood. And what I mean by that is, and then, well, I'll get into that later. What I mean by that is this: when they age out of being alpha males, they have nothing to fall back on. And then you have other guys who aren't considered alpha male, they consider beta males, right? But they're beta in the sense of these are the secondary guys that women will have sex with. But these guys are bitter because they don't fit the archetype of the matriarchal alpha male. And instead of just going off and doing their own thing, they want to be a hater and just try to chop down everybody that's considered alpha. Now, I think the problem with that is, like I said earlier, the women dictate who's alpha male or not. Because even the guys who call themselves alpha male, they call themselves alpha because they have a better relationship with better sexual encounters with multiple women than the guys that they call beta. Now, these are not the guys you would take off to war. This is why I say they're not patriarchal alpha male. These are not the guys that you would try to create a business with, because they would torpedo the business chasing skirts. These are not the type of guys that you would create a product with, because they would be too busy chasing skirts and spending less time creating. These are not the type of guys that can maintain a society, because that's too much work. You know, they'll get distracted by the women. And the patriarchal alpha males handle business first and put pleasure secondary. Matriarchal alpha males put pleasure first and then worry about handling business secondary. And to a degree, this is why we blame, or we put a certain amount of responsibility at the women's feet. Because on one end, they put these dudes on a pedestal as alpha males, and these were the ones that was going to do it. And then when they didn't do it, then all of the men was messed up. And it's like, no. Guys keep saying you picking the wrong guys. Now, understand that these are the guys who turn you on. But the guys who turn you on can't turn on the lights. But the guys who can turn on the lights seem to not be able to turn you on. And the problem with that is you're choosing to be in the dark at that particular point. So how can you blame the guys for that part of it? Now this is where you back up a little bit and say, well, where are the guys to teach the next generation? The guys that you considered alpha males in the matriarchy should have been the one teaching the next generation, right? But they were irresponsible type guys. And sometimes those guys were used as cover to perpetuate not having guys in the house. Because when people talk about men in general, we looked at in the deadbeat fashion as far as fathers concerned. And mothers are allowed to get away with anything because we look at a history of, these guys walked out. These guys had a separate family. These guys didn't want real responsibilities. These guys didn't raise their kids, blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't talk about it holistically in the aspect of some of these women wanted it like that so they can have control of the situation, and now the situation's failed. They have a fallback blame system of the guy. What is that called? God dog it. It's not a fallback plan, but plausible deniability. And this is the thing. So now we stuck in all of the remnants of this matriarchal alpha male thing. And now you have a community in some ways that wants out. And in some ways I see something wrong with that, and others I don't. Because what's going to happen is all the guys who are actually patriarchal alpha males, they're going to go off in the same direction. And they're going to build and do things where they're at. Now, the other people who are matriarchal alpha males is just going to continue to fall downward. So, at the end of the day, you're going to hit your wagon. Whoever hitches their wagon to the patriarchal guys will probably live better than the people who hitch their wagon to the matriarchal alphas. But the problem is people don't want to admit that they benefit from the dysfunction of a matriarchal alpha male, so that's why they want it. They just don't want to live with the fallout of it. So, you know, it was just what I was thinking at the time. Excuse me for being sick. I'm beat up, y'all, so y'all take care. Peace.